not to be like the world and not to be like the great majority of American Christians, but to be like Jesus Christ. I don't know why you're clapping. I'm talking about you.
What's wrong with you people? I'm serious.
You can't say amen. You ought to say ouch.
Hello, humble bees. Welcome to Tulips and Honey.
All right, well, humble bees, welcome back to Tulips and Honey. I'm your host, Lauren Hereford, and today I have a very special guest joining me today. I'm very excited to welcome back on the program Lee Jones from Reformed Meditations, one of the Bar Network. I can remember things. One of the Bar Network's podcasts. Lee, thank you so much for joining me on the show.
Thank you for having me. I'm really excited to have a chat.
Awesome. Okay, so before we go into like the depth of everything, because we're going to discuss your super awesome podcast, which I've been binge listening to ever since you let me in on the secret that this was your podcast, because I had already subscribed, but since I didn't recognize it, I was like, I don't know what this one is. So we'll talk about that in a minute. But before we do, can you share your testimony with everybody?
Sure. I've been a Christian since I was about 6 years old or so. So I was a very young convert, and so I've been into the whole repent and believe thing for a long time. So I was convicted of my sin when I was about that age, and then God's been very merciful to me over the course of my life, and I've by His grace been able to grow in maturity and knowledge, and hopefully in witness to those around me. So I'm very grateful to Him for His blessings there. College was a big growing point for me. I had always attended church growing up, and with my family, my whole extended family, and so we were always at the same church. So to be away from all of them in a different place was a very overall good but trying experience for me. And that was when I got interested in Reformed theology, was when I was in college, and that was a big turning point for me.
I was just going to ask you that about the Reformed theology. So it's really cool that you have this testimony where you were young, because a lot of times people who have that same or similar testimony, they feel sort of weird about the fact that all these other folks are like, yeah, I was like 80 and I'd done all this horrible stuff. So I'm glad that you were able to share that. But so you went to college. What happened? Because usually people go to college and they move further away from solid doctrine. So how did you end up in college getting closer to solid doctrine?
Yeah, well, I had, I was a committed Christian, all through my childhood and early young adulthood. And when I went off to college, I wanted to make sure and confirm that my faith was my own faith and not simply just me copying the faith of my parents or my family. Right. So I did a really dangerous thing, and I decided I wanted to read through the Bible without any of my preconceived notions previously. Wow. Which is a dangerous thing. Like, that's not necessarily something I recommend to anybody, but it just so happened that at that time I was also an avid podcast listener, and it happened upon Renewing Your Mind, the Ligonier Ministry podcast. And so I was listening to R.C. Sproul at the same time I was embarking on this biblical reading experiment, and it turned me into the cranky Reformed Baptist that I am today.
It's not enough to be Reformed. You also have to be cranky. It's true. And the beard is necessary.
Yeah. The beard matters.
What does Spurgeon say about beards?
I remember one day clicked for me. I love the beards. That was I did start growing a beard pretty quickly after I became convinced of Reformed theology.
That's funny.
It's funny because it all kind of clicked for me. One day I was reading my Bible over lunch, and I had just started reading Ephesians, and I got to Ephesians 2:1 through 10. And as I read through that passage, which is a pretty, as about it now, a pretty straightforward gospel presentation, but it was really revolutionary, and that was kind of when all pieces came into place. I'm like, oh yeah, this whole thing makes sense now, and it's been straight on ever since then.
Wow, that is so great! Oh, I love all of the R.C. Sproul stuff, and it's so neat to have that even now that he's gone. And how funny that you just sort of randomly stumbled into it.
Mm-hmm.
We hear of like YouTube holes that people fall down, but to fall down a podcasting hole is a lot different. And you have to be a very avid podcast listener to do that. Is that why you started podcasting yourself?
I loved it. Yeah. I loved Renewing Your Mind. There were a couple other theological podcasts that I was listening to at the moment too, because I've been listening to podcasts for a long time. I've been listening to different. They weren't Christian podcasts at the beginning, but in the early days when podcasting was really first coming around in like '05, '06. So I've been listening to different podcasts ever since then. That was back when basically podcasts were just reprogrammed public radio shows.
Yeah.
And so looking for Christian podcasts, I was just fortunate that God steered me away from, the Joel Osteen podcasts and things like that, and put me on to Sproul instead.
Yeah.
Who knows what would
grace of
happen?
God. Yeah.
Yeah. All an act of mercy.
Yeah, absolutely. So you're listening to all these great, podcasts, but it probably, I don't know about you, but like a few years ago, there actually wasn't just the mass amount of podcasts that we have like access to today, which is important because, Reformed people disagree with like one another on everything. So we all need our own specific podcasts so that
Sure.
we can all have our own, I love podcasts. So I think, the more the merrier, but what made you decide? Was it that whole thing of like, wow, there's Joel Osteen podcasts out there and I don't like that? Or how did you end up podcasting yourself?
Well, I started in podcasting with guys with Bibles. So two friends of mine, Sean and Scott, and we were all burgeoning theology nerds, and we thought a podcast might be a nice outlet for an excuse for us to have some theological and biblical conversations with each other, and maybe some other people would get some good out of it. Because a lot of Christian podcasts, at least up until maybe even just a few years, a lot of them were either based in a seminary or taught almost in like a class format by a pastor or an accredited theologian. But we thought it was an interesting idea to go at it from just from a layman's perspective. Average Christians, none of us are pastors, and so I love that format. And that's the kind of thing that I'm trying to carry on now with the Reformed Meditations too. It's the similar drive of the thoughts of a layman who's really interested in theology, and maybe that will hit different for people out there who are maybe interested in theology but think it may be too much over their head. Because if it's not over my head, then you've got a pretty good shot that you'll understand it too.
Well, you're doing a fantastic job. I absolutely love it. I love it. I've been listening to the theonomy, the series that you did through the theonomies in Scripture, and it's really helpful, to have you as a layman really lay that out and explain it. And as you go along, you're explaining theology as you're teaching through these, which is like a double, I guess, killing two birds with one stone kind of thing. Because you're telling us about the theonomies, but you're also giving us all this great theology. So you're doing a fantastic job. But I have to ask, where did the name Reformed Meditations come from?
I've had a burr in my saddle for the last couple years over the culture of obsessive meditation. There are apps out there or focus on just yourself, focus on your breathing, focus on these kinds of things. And like I said, I've had a burr in my saddle over that because Christian meditation is sort of a lost art and is the opposite of that, because as Christians, when we meditate, we're not emptying our mind, filling ourselves. We're focusing on Christ. We're focusing on the Word. We're focused out. So in fact, we are active in our meditation, not passive. And so that was something that I wanted to kind of put front and center in this new podcast experiment, was that we should meditate. We can meditate as Christians, but we don't meditate the way the world does. We meditate like Christ, and we meditate on Christ.
Oh,
so that's what I've been
great.
trying to do.
I love that. That is so cool. Okay, that's very, very cool. Yeah, it is frustrating whenever biblical behaviorisms and stuff are taken and just sort of, deconstructed. Maybe, I don't know if that falls under that, but it is frustrating whenever there's this important thing, because then it's more difficult to get people to do it, especially folks that have come out of New Age. Mm-hmm. When they hear somebody say, "Oh, we're going to meditate on the Word," they hear something completely different than what the biblical meaning is behind it. So I'm really glad that you're addressing that and that you feel passionate about that, because it is important. And if we don't address all these things, people are just going to continue being confused. But you have some select. It's funny because you talk about being a layman, but you're brilliant, and I'm just going to say that as somebody who has been stomped by you in the church trivia nights from the Revived Studio guys inviting us on, and I always thought it was really funny whenever they send me the invite, and I'm like, I would love to go. I think public embarrassment is fun. Yes, please let me do this live. So I'm there for the comedic relief to be ridiculous, but you're there to actually win, which you do very frequently because you're brilliant. So you obviously have a passion for church history. Where did that stem from? And why is church history so important to you?
I love church history because I think it's really important for Christians to have a good basis in knowledge of how we've gotten to where we are today. Because the way that we approach the problems of our time or theological controversies or any sort of things, there's no sense reinventing the wheel. And as I've said before, in fact, I think I even said it in the chat on one of your latest live streams, was that there are no new heresies, right? And so if we understand the old heresies and who was teaching them and what they're about, we'll be able to take the shiny packaging off that our current day likes to wrap old heresies up in, be able to do away with them. So the more we know of church history, the easier it is to kind of navigate today's waters. Because there is nothing new under the sun, as the Bible says. So we might as well believe that. I got to tell you, I learned my church history through podcasts.
Right?
Not gonna lie. Two specific podcasts. 5 Minutes in Church History, which is a Ligonier podcast, which is amazing. And then the Christian Almanac, which is a more recent podcast, which is done by 1517. I do love my Lutherans. Sometimes I get in trouble for that, but that's also good. Yeah,
that's okay. I had Chris Roseborough on the program, and his episode is one of everybody's favorites. So you're good with your love for Lutherans.
He's great.
I just had this conversation the other day with my husband where he was like, "So the Lutheran Church, do they stem from Martin Luther? Because it seems like they're a little further away." And I was like, "Well, there's sections. You can't just can't lump them all in. There's sections. You got to be you got to be loving to the." We do have some brothers and sisters in certain areas, but I do think that's really cool. I haven't heard of that second podcast. I'm going to find it, and I'll still lose because my memory is worse than a goldfish. I can't remember anything, and the only reason I've ever gotten any questions right is if it literally was something I learned so long ago that my mind is like, oh yeah, sure, why not? We can remember that. But if it's something I tried to study for in advance, I'm not going to remember it. But church history, it's so fun to get to learn these things, and I love that you mentioned the heresies and everything that just keeps coming back because it's. Well, okay, let's be honest. It is a little frustrating whenever you're reading through church history and you're like, wait a minute, we've already dealt with this nonsense. Why are we having to deal with it again? But then you meet the men of God who dealt with that nonsense. And you sort of, well, I guess it's not really like a bonding, but it feels like you get to know these people. Like there's times in my life where I'm just like, you know what, I just need to hang out with my Puritan friends. And I can't read anything other than that. You just go through those little moments where you're actually getting to know our church family throughout history through this. And it helps encourage me not to get so discouraged because the heresies, they do just keep getting repackaged. And you mentioned one on that live event, which stemmed this whole super exciting episode here. You mentioned deconstructionism, which is something that Kristen Everett and I have been talking about via text because she sees this a massive amount over on TikTok, which is odd because TikTok is, not necessarily something that you would consider to be a Christian platform, but there are, there are Reformed believers over there. There's some wonderful,
definitely not.
Yeah, there's some wonky stuff, but the majority of what she's coming up against is deconstructionism. So since you mentioned that, and I have you here and you're brilliant, will you let us know a little bit about that and why it's so dangerous?
It's very dangerous. It seems to be kind of a newer term, at least based on the attention I've been paying. I remember back even just a few years ago where people were talking about deconversions, and this seems to be stemming out of that. I did a too long of a blog series on the Guys with Bibles blog when the lead singer of Hawk Nelson and the same things are that boiled over there come through in the deconstruction stories that we see online now, where people had very basic foundational questions that nobody answered in the churches grew up in, and they were given no tools to find the answers themselves. And so instead of looking for the tools or asking questions, they've decided to quote unquote deconstruct, which in my own definition of seeing online, you're taking the faith as it was delivered to you and taking it apart bit by bit until there's nothing left. Wow. So it's sort of a laying down of the faith that some people have engaged in. One of the prominent people is actually Abraham Piper, John Piper's son, who's really active on TikTok and has done a lot of stories. And they're rough. They're rough to listen to because he's trying to sound so intelligent about the whole thing, like he's completely dismantled the lies or inaccuracies that were taught to him. And really all he's done is just a different worldly platitudes. And again, as we talked about with church history already, these are kind of things that have already been answered way before our time.
Right.
And they pop up under different guises.
Wow.
And I had wondered, and when we were talking on the live stream about whether theological shifts can be considered deconstruction. So like for me, I reformed. I came to an understanding of Reformed theology later. Was that deconstruction? I don't consider it that, and the reason why is because everything I've seen from people coming from a deconstruction point of view, it all involves doubt.
Yeah.
And I don't think that shifting your theological basis should have anything to do with doubt.
Right.
In fact, it should be about increasing trust. Increasing trust in Scripture as you're putting together your basis for why you believe what you believe. There should, obviously I guess there can be doubt in there. Doubt is something that we're plagued with as sinners more often than we like to admit. But the doubt that makes you abandon solid Christian teaching really doesn't come into that. I don't, in my own estimation. I'm not sure maybe what you might think about that, but
no, I agree with you 100%. That's what's so disturbing to me about this is we're supposed to be growing in the grace and the knowledge of our Lord. We're not supposed to be regressing. If we're, if there are folks leaving the faith, then they really were never of us. So it's frightening for me to see people who are basically saying we can doubt all of this stuff, but I'm still going to teach in your circles, and I'm still going to try it. Like it's two different things. So we see like the guys from Good Mythical Morning. They decided that they were just going to finally come out and admit the fact that they'd lost the faith, and it had been a gradual process. But they're not actually spending all of their time trying to convince everybody else also to give up their faith. Like it doesn't seem to be their focus. Where they'll go on interviews and they'll answer questions, and so that's different than what these folks are doing, where they've deconstructed their own faith, but they also want you to doubt. And to me, that's like you said, that's completely opposite. Whenever I realized that Reformed was really just another word for like biblical, I was like, oh, this is great. This is learning. I'm learning and I'm understanding. So rather than deconstructing, it was just really building on top of the faith that was already laid down at my salvation, and adding to it each time with more understanding. The more I understand of God's attributes, the more I understand of the doctrines of grace, the solas, all that stuff, the better I understand about how incredible it is that God saved me, because I understand Him better and I understand my own wretchedness better. That's the opposite of doubting. That really is, like you said, putting even more emphasis on faith. So I think you're right. I agree with you about that, about the deconstructing really being the opposite of turning to faith. But I can understand why their position would state we're doing the same thing if we're growing in grace. I can understand from their perspective. Basically what they're saying is any change is deconstructing. But there's a difference between taking something apart and adding on to it. Like, I don't know if you have ever enjoyed Legos as much as I have. It's really hard to peel those Legos apart.
Oh, yeah.
I figured. I'm just, I'm as much of a dork as everybody expects me to be.
Especially after you've stepped on them and hurt yourself.
I am the luckiest mom in the world. My daughter hates Legos. She cannot sit still, and she can't stand like the process of it. So I have never had to step on a Lego, but I like them myself. and it's sort of like a really great analogy if you think about building things and adding onto it is totally different than taking it apart and building something new. That's completely just utter heresies. I am glad that you explained that and that you made that clarification, because it is a lot of emotionalism. What I'm seeing with the deconstruction stuff, people are very emotional about these things, and I can see it coming out of the Word of Faith. I saw people absolutely devastated by what they were being taught. People who needed medical treatment and wouldn't get it. People who should have been taking specific medical medicines and were refusing to take it, even though it was life-threatening not to take it. But I can really see how certain false teachings could lead to that. It's a little harder to understand how the Reformed theology could lead to that. I can't see it, but that's probably just because I'm standing on this side of it rather than the other side of it. And maybe I just need to listen more and try to understand. But as like a card-carrying Calvinist, I'm just like, this is the best. I don't know why anybody would ever want to deconstruct it, because it's awesome. But have you noticed anything like this on Twitter? Is it a growing trend, do you think, or do you think that this is going to be something that pitters off into something different?
It strikes me as sort of a meme like talking deconstruction is just another way of saying what people have said all along, that they disagree with Christianity on various issues. People who considered themselves Christians formerly and no longer are. It's just new buzz language to put on it. But from what I've seen, it's the same stories of people that have left the faith in the past. And, you know, a lot of it I chalk up to the fact that, you know, the truth of God is spiritually discerned. And if your eyes have not been opened, and maybe this is my Calvinism coming out, I suppose, but if your eyes haven't been opened and your ears haven't been open to hear the word, then of course you're going to disagree, because Christianity is all about the glory of God and his love toward us and our love for him, because he loved us first. That is not going to be appealing to an unredeemed person. So of course they'll disagree. So disagreements with Christianity are nothing new. But it's the way that it gets not only presented to us online, the sort of language that's used, and then the fact that the world is so friendly to people who hate Christianity. So they will receive a bigger platform than those who defend the truth.
That makes sense.
And that's the way it is. That's the way it always has been. That's the way of the world. So some of it really isn't all that big of a surprise. It's just it's almost like trends in fashion or something.
Yeah.
You know, this is the hot new thing right now, and there will be a new trend later. But we'll just live through this one, like Christians have lived through so many other memes of the past.
Yeah, I was really concerned whenever the whole like young, restless, and reformed kind of movement was gaining steam, and it was heading towards a little bit more of a tipsy way where folks were sort of jumping on, and it was maybe a little bit more fun and exciting, whereas I'm all over here like, this is too deep for my poor little pathetic brain, and I can't you know, like go around, you know, waving a little exciting, I don't know, flag or whatever, being all pumped with everybody, because it was intense. It was an intense point in time where I was learning and understanding in a way that I had to get rid of all the nonsense that I had been taught. So when all that was happening, I was concerned, and actually Becca and I talked about this whenever she was co-hosting at the very beginning of this podcast, that it was a concern of ours to see that there were these sort of, they wanted to look cool, and it was a bit of a trend at the time. And I wonder if some of the folks that were on that trend have jumped on this one. I'd be interested to keep an eye out and see, because it is a disturbing thing to see folks who they'll be all like, oh, I know the doctrines of grace and I know all about that, but they also are deconstructing. But one thing that really gets me, and I'd love to hear your thoughts about this, it was definitely not on the list of questions that I sent you, but it occurred to me, and you're here and you're trapped, so you have to answer. So I've noticed that they really don't like it, and I don't just mean the folks that are deconstructing. I mean like people who've left the faith in general. They really don't like it whenever we point out, if you've left the faith, then you weren't of us to begin with. Why do you think it is that bothers them so much? Because I've never heard somebody say, yeah, that's right. I always get an argument back to that.
The postmodern mindset that has sort of infected the world is all about tribes, right? Everybody's got a tribe that you've got to belong to. And if we have a credible way of saying you were never a Christian, you were never part of this. Sure, you may have attended a church, you may have even been a member at a church for a long time, but you never believed in Christ. If you had, you would have persevered with us. Despite whatever disagreements you may have about something or other, your faith in Christ would have still united with ours. But you left. You did not have that. That's infuriating to the postmodern world, because we have, by saying that, you have delegitimized their time in the tribe. At that time, they considered it important enough to be part of their identity. So you've attacked identity by saying you never were one of us.
Wow.
Part of this is why I'm on a personal mission to make confessionalism cool again, because the thing that's great about the Reformed confessions is they leave no wiggle room on things like this. Churches that have a loosey-goosey, even some Calvinistic churches may have a loosey-goosey sort of statement of faith that you could assent to mentally, whether you believed it or not, but you can't escape the rigors of a Reformed confession. So like for myself as a Reformed Baptist, I'm 1689 confession affirming, and as well as a lot of the other Reformed confessions, except on a few minor details. Those are things that you really can't assent to simply mentally.
Right.
The contemporary Christian world has made it too easy to just speak Christianese and get along without a true knowledge of the faith.
Yeah.
And I know sometimes the Calvinistic circles get accused of being too cerebral and
I
if
get
you check
accused
the
of that
right,
all the time.
it's almost like checking theological boxes,
Yeah.
in order to get along. Well, no, the boxes are there because we're trying to ascertain and grow the faith of the faithful.
Yeah.
And that's a gift from Christ, and we have not only a duty but also the privilege to go deeper into the Word, to understand the works of God, the nature of God, all of it based in study of the Word. There's nothing wrong with that. There's nothing cerebral about that at all. That
Right?
you may learn something mentally from that, and learning theology is good, but that's got to reach the heart.
Wow.
You got to
I
have
think
both. You have
that's
to have both the head and the heart.
Yeah, that it's so weird that you mentioned that, because actually while we were trying to find a specific church in town, I actually saw on a website that claimed, they're like, yeah, confessions are great, we love them, we don't hold to any of them because they're in the past and we're today. And I was like, that's a weird thing to put in there. Like, that's so random.
Really
Yeah, like, I love the 1689. Are you kidding me? That's like the best. Why would you specifically put just randomly? I was like, okay, well, maybe not that particular church. We'll find
They
one.
have a low view of church history.
Yes, yeah, there you go. And I don't like to be talked down to. Now, granted, my IQ and my level of intelligence might actually need to be talked down to, but I don't want you to talk down to me. I want to go to a church where you talk, where you teach me all of these things, and where it's really edifying, and it's theologically rich. And just seeing that, automatically I was like, oh, this is going to be one of those places where it's not going to connect all the dots. And if you connect all these dots with the confessions, the church history, the theology, all this stuff, deconstruction, and really all these other heresies, I mean, you're putting up a system where your congregation can fight against all of those different issues all on their own, just simply because you are acknowledging church. Why would you not? I don't know. I do not understand why you would not acknowledge church history. But speaking of tribes, I have a very important question for you. You already, of course, know that tribes are sometimes necessary. There's two important tribes right now in the Christian faith that are fighting against one another, and that's over pineapple pizza. So I need to know before I can so I don't stick my little squirrel here on you. Which side do you? You know what? I should explain that really quickly, because this is a podcast, not just YouTube. So for those of you listening, I have a new squirrel puppet, and I'm really excited about my squirrel puppet. Yeah, he's like super detailed, and I don't know how to actually use him yet. But whenever I figure out how to make him do stuff, you want to bet it's going to be nonstop. This is ridiculous, but when my daughter saw it, she was like, "You have to buy that." She was like, "It doesn't matter what it costs, you have to have it." So I was like, well,
You're rename this Tulips and Squirrels.
I'm in the squirrel tribe and the Oreo tribe, and so I got my little squirrel here. But I do need to know about your pineapple pizza proficiency, so I can see whether or not I need to be praying for you or not.
Yeah, I affirm against pineapple on pizza.
Praise God.
As I affirm against the papists, and I affirm against pineapple.
Oh, that was beautiful. Thank you. I didn't expect that. That's the best. That is the best answer I've gotten since Phil Johnson told me that pineapple pizza is blasphemy. That was wonderful. Thank you.
My pleasure.
I love it. Oh my goodness. Okay, see, now you can come back on the program and we can be friends. And my squirrel will not attack you. He's gonna. My daughter thinks that me purchasing this means I don't still want a live squirrel as a pet, but that's not true. I do. I still want a live squirrel as a pet. This is just practice. Anyways,
I've been bitten by a squirrel before.
Have you really?
Yeah,
I am so sorry to hear that. It's not funny. I'm sorry.
It was my fault. No, it was my fault. I chased it into a corner of like an outbuilding or a barn, and like dumb teenage me, I'm like, oh, I'll try to pick it up. And I picked it up, and it just sank those teeth right into my hand.
Oh no!
Oh yeah. So like,
I've heard they're really sharp and actually they're quite painful. Oh, did you have to do like the whole rabies shot thing too?
No, I didn't. I didn't do any rabies shots, and I'm still living. So
yeah, I was about to say, because I heard there's like 12 shots and it's horrible. But who wouldn't want to, corner a squirrel and pick them up? Yeah. It's not your fault that they are fluffy and cute. You can't.
They're fluffy and adorable.
Yes, they look so friendly. I've had so many people tell me that they were attacked by squirrels. They're like, yeah, they look friendly, and people show all these videos of them being friendly, but really, if you go anywhere near them, they will attack you. And I'm like, I know, I realize that. That's why
they're
I don't
libertarians. They don't want to be messed with.
I know, they just want their freedom. For heaven's sakes, we had one living outside our house that would twitch its tail and chipper at us anytime we looked at it. Like, don't even look at me. Don't even look at me. This is my tree. This is my world. And I mean, I expected at any moment for it to actually throw stuff at us, but it never did. And we fed it, and it got really fat. But anyways, that's all a massive squirrel. I have one more question for you, brother, before I let you go. What is it that we can be praying for you for with your podcast or your life or anything that's going on?
Thank you. Thank you for the offer. if you'd pray for G3. I'm going to be there next week. So prayers for safe travel for not only me, but for everybody coming. Pray that it's a good and glorifying to God conference. It'll be edifying for all the members. I'm really excited to meet some people that I've known for a while, but never got to meet in person. And that's huge. And and I work in the medical field. I actually work in nursing homes. And
I didn't know that. Do you really?
Yeah.
Oh, that's so cool.
Yeah, I've been working in nursing homes for about 5 years in different positions, and there's a lot of trepidation right now with vaccines and vaccine mandates, and so prayers for my friends and colleagues across the country in hospital settings, nursing home settings, independent living, assisted living, that there's not a huge loss of employment over disagreements over things like this. I'm concerned about all those folks. So.
Yeah, unfortunately, I've seen a lot of folks online that are absolutely devastated that they are having to. And I was also really shocked to find that there were churches out there that were like, you can't come to our church unless you've been vaccinated. And I was like, I don't see that in any kind of verse or scripture whatsoever. I don't really care what kind of political consequences it has to say this. That's not your church. You don't get to decide why people can come and can't come. That's God's church. So this is very concerning, but we will definitely be praying for you and for G3. So if folks are going to be there at G3, they can find you with the other bar network folks, right? That's exciting.
Right. Yep. I'll be spending some time at the bar table and hanging out. So it's going to be a great time. I'm really looking forward to it, and I hope everybody who comes out will have a great time and learn some good stuff, have some good fellowship, and it'd be useful and edifying.
Who is your favorite speaker? Who are you looking forward to the most to get to listen to?
I love Conrad Mbewe.
Oh yeah,
I'm a huge fan. So I'm really excited to hear from him and maybe even be able to see him on the floor and thank him for his ministry. I've learned a lot from him and benefited from his ministry a great deal. So I'd be excited to talk to him.
That's a great one. I absolutely adore everything. Like all of his stuff. It's not just the accent. Like the accent helps, okay? I'm not gonna lie. I do enjoy getting to listen to folks with accents. It's fun. But also
just the plus.
God, he is so steadfast. Like I have never once heard him waver in anything, whether it's popular or not. He is so steadfast. So that's a great one. Well, in that case,
stuff on I love one of the first things I listened to of him was I think it was a Shepherd's Conference presentation about witch doctors and about the influx of the prosperity gospel and how it has blended in with traditional pagan practices in Africa and in Zambia too, but even just broadly throughout Africa. And that was a huge eye-opening perspective I hadn't considered before. And that was when I first heard that several years ago. That was when I became a big Conrad fan.
Yes, I remember that. And I'll put a link to that and anything else that we mentioned because that particular one, growing up in a house with a practicing Wiccan, it was amazing to me how when we started going to church, we started going to these Word of Faith churches, how similar the language was, how similar the practices were, how very much it was like spells but with Christianese put into it. And so and I've also recently heard from some folks that live in areas that are really, really bogged down with that kind of stuff, and it's frightening, like the stuff that's going on for that kind of stuff, and to have it mixed in with Christianity is just pretty much on par with deconstruction. Deconstructing or adding to it with heresy is all bad. But that's all the questions that I have for you, brother. I'm going to make sure that everybody can find all the links to your awesome, fantastic podcast in the descriptions down below because it is wonderful. I'm super thankful for everything that you're doing for teaching, and really I adore the Theonomy series is where I'm at right now. But I did also listen to the Stoic one, and that was really helpful because when I clicked on it, I was like, what does that mean? And I know I'd heard the word Stoic before, like in novels, but it was usually like referring to how somebody's personality was. So I was really glad to learn all of that stuff. So thank you for teaching us in a way where we can understand, and people like me can even understand with my crayons and my coloring paper to take notes.
Thank you. Whether you think it or not, you are brilliant.
Oh, thank you.
I appreciate your show.
You have to say that or else I'll sick the squirrels on you, so I understand. Good job. All right. I'm so sorry. Okay, brother, all right.
Thanks for having me on. This is great.
Absolutely. I guess I'll see you next time we do a contest. Next time we meet, we'll be enemies again. So
on the field of battle.
That's right. That's right. I'm fodder. I'm battle fodder, but that's okay. I won one time by technicality, and that's all that matters. All right, brother.
That's good.
I'll talk to you later then.
Take care. Thanks, Lauren.
God bless you. Bye. All right, Humblebees, I hope that was as edifying to you as it was for me. I am so thankful that Lee was able to join me on the program. I always have so much fun whenever I get to chat with him. He's absolutely hilarious, but just truly, truly brilliant. And I'm very thankful for all the hard work that he puts into not just doing podcasts, but also just like accuracy is like his strong suit. His podcasts, they are filled with educational content in a way that doesn't bog your brain down, that you can actually understand it. So I'm super thankful for that. And I'm really excited that I got to have him on the program, and he put up with all my nonsense, and big bonus plus check mark, all the good stuff. He's also sanctified in his eating habits and doesn't do the whole pineapple pizza thing, which is important because we're just going to keep on battling this battle with all of you unsanctified heathens out there eating pineapple pizza. We're praying for you, so don't worry about that. So I did want to mention before I let you guys go that there is a link in the descriptions down below for the GoFundMe account for Pastor Edward, one of our podcasters here on the Tulips and Honey Hub channel. If you are able to help financially or through prayer or through sharing that, all three of those are such a huge, tremendous help, and I know they're very thankful. Please do be praying for both of them as they go through this difficult season. Every time the infection is causing more issues, anytime they have to go back in and remove more or scrape out the bone or anything like that, he has to start the recovery process over completely. So this has been going on since February and on and off. Please join us in praying for them and helping them any way that you can. And if you are not already a part of the Tulips and Honey Hub, the Facebook group, you can join us. I put a link in the description down below for that as well. And if you want to know how to contact me, there is an email address down there, and you can find me on social media. Really, the best way to get a hold of me is probably via tagging me and stuff, because I miss a lot with all the notifications going on. But also, there is the Friday Mega List, so if you're having a hard time getting a hold of me, Friday Mega Lists are a great way for you to actually interact directly with me while I am live on Friday. Usually 7:30 Central Standard Time is whenever we start that, so don't miss it. Also, last thing, and I promise I will let you guys go, we do have other podcasters, as I mentioned already, on the podcasting channel. So what we have on the YouTube channel is just me and my Friday Mega Live List and my Monday episodes. But on the Tulips and Honey Hub, we have other podcasters that'll be podcasting throughout the week, as well as me. But on the podcasting channel, where you're listening rather than hearing it, you don't get to actually hear the Friday Mega List. So there's benefits to both, downsides to both. So you should follow and subscribe both, just in case. I don't know why not, because subscribing and clicking all the buttons is important, I hear, for the algorithms and whatnot. But anyways, that's all I have for you, wonderful Humblebees. I love you all. God bless you. Have a wonderful week. I'll see you on Friday. Bye.
Thanks for listening, Humblebees. This is Tulips and Honey. Over and out.
I think that diamond still needs a little more polish.
Yeah.
What'd you do? We'll continue eating it forever just because this is a song that never. Wait. Yes. No. It goes on. It's like Pringles.
Yes.
Can't stop. Can't stop. Won't stop.
Stop the magic.
Please don't stop the. Please don't stop the. Please don't stop the music. Music. Okay. Music. Music. Oops. Also, last thing I promise, and I'll totally let you guys go. Oh, sorry, Mr. Squirrel. I did not mean to bump into you.